Welcome to Martha Runs the World, a podcast with a new take on running, fitness, and all things health-oriented. I'm Martha Hughes, your host, and each week I present a new topic that is of interest to all runners. Welcome to episode 280 of Martha Runs the World. There's one distance in running that has mystique, has kind of an air of mystery around it. There aren't a lot of races around this distance, and there isn't much talk about it, but there is a lot of history around it. And that's the mile. The mile run, which is about 1,760 yards, or exactly 1,609.344 meters, is considered a middle distance foot race in track. Although not to most road runners and trail runners, it's not. It's a short distance race. The world record in the mile run is the fastest time set by a runner in middle distance track. World Athletics is the official body which oversees the records. I'm going to talk about the record-setting distance, the record-setting times, the history, the people, and some interesting races that you may want to run. Hicham El Guerrouj, and I'm sure I slaughtered that name, I apologize, is the current men's record holder with his time of 3 minutes 43.13 seconds, while Faith Kipyegon has the world women's record of 4 minutes and 7.64 seconds. And I'm wondering, when will women break the 4 minutes, which I'm sure is going to come real soon because it's right at that 4-minute limit. Since 1976, the mile has been the only non-metric distance recognized by the IAAF for record purposes. However, in international competitions, such as the Olympics, the term mile almost always refers to a distance of 1,500 meters, which is about 109 meters shorter than the mile. So they don't really even use the mile anymore. And I'm wondering if that's going to go out of favor. Future, we'll see. I don't know. Accurate times for the mile run, which is basically 1.609344 kilometers, have been recorded since 1850, when the first precisely measured running tracks were built. Foot racing had become popular in England by the 17th century, when footmen would race and their masters would wager on the result. By the 19th century, pedestrianism, as it was called, had become extremely popular, and the best times recorded in the period were by professionals. Even after professional foot racing died out, it was not until 1915 that the professional record of 4 minutes and 12 seconds set by Walter George in 1886 was surpassed by an amateur. Progression of the minute record accelerated in the 1930s as newsreel coverage greatly popularized the sport, making stars out of milers such as Jules Ladomergue and Jack Lovelock and Glenn Cunningham. In the 1940s, the Swedes Arne Andersson and Gunter Haag lowered the record to just over 4 minutes, while racing was curtailed during World War II in the combatant countries. After the war, Roger Bannister of the United Kingdom and John Landy of Australia vied to be the first to break the fabled 4-minute mile barrier. And I'll talk about Roger Bannister in just a little bit. I have a whole segment on him. On the women's side, the first sub-5-minute mile was achieved by UK's Diane Leather 23 days after Bannister's first sub-4-minute mile. Now, this is weird, and of course it happened a lot in women's sports. It kind of still does today in different ways. But the International Association of Athletics didn't even recognize women records for this distance until 1967. So that's kind of ridiculous. In the men, I'll give you some examples as time went on. In the men, John Paul Jones of the U.S. in 1913 had a time of 4 minutes, 14.4 seconds in Alston, Mass. And then in the United Kingdom, Roger Bannister, he broke the 4-minute barrier and had a time of 3 minutes, 59.4 seconds in Oxford, UK in 1954. And then Jim Ryan of the U.S., fabled runner Jim Ryan, had a time of 3 minutes, 51.3 seconds in Berkeley, California. Then in the UK, Sebastian Coe in Oslo in 1979 had a time of 3 minutes and 48.95 seconds. That is so amazing, really amazing times. And then Hicham El Garouj, and I'm sure I pronounced that horribly, of Morocco. He has the fastest time, which was 1999. So it's been in place for a very long time, and that's the 3 minutes, 43.13 seconds. And he did that in Rome in 99. Like I said, that's been in place for a very long time. That's what, 25 years? No one has broken that time in 25 years. On the women's side, Anne Smith in 1967 had a time of 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Then Mary Deckard of the U.S. in Auckland, New Zealand, had a time of 4 minutes, 21 seconds, 0.74. And then Paula Ivan of Romania in 1989 in Nice, France, had a time of 4 minutes, 15.61 seconds. And then Faith Kipyegon of Kenya in Morocco in 2023, so that's pretty recent, had a time of 4 minutes, 7.64 seconds. So that's getting so close to that, breaking the 4 minutes for women. I just hope they could do that soon. That would be really amazing if they could do that. As a side note, and it doesn't count at anything really because it's just kind of a thing. As a side note, the record for the fastest mile ever run on any terrain is held by Craig Wheeler, who ran a downhill mile in 1993 in a time of 3 minutes and 24 seconds. So it's not officially recognized as a record due to downhill grade because, of course, you can run faster downhill, but that's pretty darn fast. So it's kind of interesting. Now, the history of the mile run event began in England, where it was used as a distance for gambling races. It survived track and field's switch to metric distances in the 1900s, and it retained its popularity with the chase for the 4-minute mile in the 1950s as a high point for the race. It truly is an anomaly in the racing world. There's no other race that has the imperial distance. Well, I guess really the marathon is 26.2 or the half marathon, because in the U.S. we don't call it anything else but the marathon and the half marathon. So that's not exactly true. I mean, and there are 10-mile races and that kind of thing. But I guess in the Olympics, or in the Olympic world or the European world or whatever, they use all the metric distances. The source I'm saying is saying it's the only one that does, but that's not necessarily true. So I take that back. In spite of the roughly equivalent 1,500-meter race, which is used instead of the mile at World Championships and Olympic Games, and is sometimes referred to as the foremost middle-distance track event in athletics, the mile run is present in all fields of athletics. And since the 76, it is the only imperial distance for which World Athletics has its own books for official world records. Okay, so that makes sense. It's the only distance, if you go into World Athletics, that it has its own records. All right, so I understand that then. So I guess they don't have the marathon in the World Athletics. This is track mainly that they're talking about. So forget what I said. All right. Although the mile is not featured in any major championships, there are middle distance races: the Wanamaker Mile, the Dream Mile, the Emsley Carr Mile, the Bowerman Mile races are among the foremost annual middle distance races. And like I said, these are track races. These aren't races that you're going to go out and sign up and run on the street. These are basically track races for elite runners. Although a statute mile today is equal to a length of 5,280 feet, the distance of the English mile gained its current definition of 1,760 yards through a statute of Parliament of England in 1593. Thus, the history of the mile run began in England, and it initially found usage within the wagered running contests in the 18th and 19th century. Such contests would attract large numbers of spectators and gamblers, so many that the activity became a professional one for its more established participants. I think that's kind of funny that it was mainly for wagers. So I guess if you couldn't find horses to wager on, you gambled on running on human runners for the mile race. The mile run was at the heart of the divide between professional and amateur sports in the late 19th century, as running was beginning to gain popularity in the sports world. Separate world record categories were kept for amateurs and professionals, with professional runners providing the fastest times. High-profile contests between Britain's William Cummings and Walter George brought much publicity to the sport, as did George's races against American Lon Myers. The mile run was also one of the foremost events at the amateur AAA championships. Although the spotlight was shining on the running scene, the categories remained distinct, but the respective rise in amateurism and the decline of the professional sector saw the division become irrelevant in the 20th century. The mile run continued to be a popular distance in spite of the metrication of track and field and athletics in general, replacing the imperial distance for the metric mile, the 1,500 meters. It was the 1,500 meters, sometimes referred to as the metric mile, which was featured on the Olympic athletics program. The International Amateur Athletics Federation, the IAAF, formed in 1912 and confirmed the first officially recognized world record in the mile the following year. The fact that the mile run was the only imperial distance to retain its official world record status after 1976 reflects its continued popularity in the international and primarily metric era. Decades later, the distance remains widespread and is often used as a benchmark for distance running performance. The top men's middle distance runners continued to compete in the mile run in the first half of the 1900s. Paavo Nurmi, Jack Lovelock, and Sidney Wooderson were all world record holders over the distance. In the 1940s, Swedish runners Gunder Haag and Arne Andersson pushed times into new territory as they set 3 world records each during their rivalry over the decade. What an exciting time that was. Indeed, the goal of completing a sub-4 minute mile sparked further interest in the distance in the 1950s, and to this day, many competitive runners are still chasing that ambitious barrier. Englishman Roger Bannister became the first person to achieve that feat in May 1954, and to his effort, conducted with the help of Chris Brasher and Chris Chataway, was a key moment in the rise of the use of pacemakers at the top level of the sport, an aspect which is now commonplace in non-championship middle and long-distance races. In fact, pacemakers, if performing effectively, can earn generous sums of money for their performances and accurate pacing duties. The 1960s saw American Jim Ryan set world records near the 3-minute 50-second minute mark, and his achievements popularized interval workout techniques, which are still heavily used today, especially for collegiate distance runners. Jim Ryan was the first person to run a sub-4-minute mile in high school. From this period onwards, African runners began to emerge, breaking the largely white Western dominance of the distance. Kenya's Kip Keino won the mile at the 1966 British Empire and Commonwealth Games, which was among the last mile races to be held at a major multi-sport event as of 2021. Filbert Bayi of Tanzania became the African's first world record holder over the distance in 1975, although New Zealander John Walker further broke Bayi's records a few months later to become the first man under 3 minutes 50 seconds in the event. The 1980s were highlighted by the rivalry between British runners Sebastian Coe and Steve Ovett, who improved the record 5 times between them, including 2 records in the Oslo Dream Mile. Mile run contests were made a key feature of many annual track and field meetings, including recreational high school and collegiate meets. In the United States, particularly in high school competitions, the 1,600 meter is a substitute for the mile run. The word mile comes from the Latin mille passus, meaning 1,000 paces, and a mile was 1,000 Roman strides, a stride being 2 paces. In 1592, the English Parliament standardized the measure of the mile, and a mile, as I said previously, is 5,280 feet. Currently, the U.S. and Great Britain use the mile as a measurement unit. In short, no running distance or field event for that matter has the history, the appeal, the magic of the mile. No other event has produced an equivalent or the recognized, coveted, still strongly resonating sub-4-minute mile standard in the sport, in the media, and in the public's mind. Put simply, the mile still matters. Now, Sir Roger Gilbert Bannister. He was born March 23rd in 1929, and he passed away March 3rd in 2018. He was an English neurologist and middle-distance athlete, and he ran the first sub-4-minute mile. At the 1952 Olympics in Helsinki, Bannister set a British record in 1,500 meters and finished in 4th place. This achievement strengthened his resolve to become the first athlete to finish the mile run in under 4 minutes. He accomplished this feat on May 6th in 1954 at Iffley Rock Track in Oxford, with Chris Chataway and Chris Brashear providing the pacing. When the announcer, Norris McWhirter, declared the time was 3, the cheer of the crowd drowned out Bannister's exact time, which was 3 minutes and 59.4 seconds. He had attained this record with minimal training while practicing as a junior doctor. Now, this is the funny part, because Bannister's record lasted just 46 days. Bannister went on to become a neurologist and master of Pembroke College in Oxford before retiring in 1993. He also was on the governing body of Abington School from 1986 to 1993. When asked if the 4-minute mile was his proudest achievement, he said he felt prouder of his contribution to the academic medicine through research into the responses of the nervous system. So there you go. Now, unfortunately, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2011, and he passed away in 2018. He was born on March 23rd in 1929 in Harrow, London. His parents were both from working-class families in Lancaster. His father moved the family to London and worked in the civil service. Bannister started his running career at Oxford in autumn of 1946 at age 17. He had never worn running spikes previously or run on a track. His training was light, even compared to the standards of the day, but he showed promise in running a mile in 1947 in 4 minutes and 24.6 seconds on only 3 weekly half-hour training sessions. So he was a natural. He was selected as an Olympic possible in 1948, but declined as he felt he was not ready to compete at that level. However, he was further inspired to become a great miler by watching the 1948 Olympics. He set his training goals on the 1952 Olympics in Helsinki. And in 1949, he improved on the 880-yard run, and he won several mile races in a time of 4 minutes and 11 seconds. He did not do too well in the Olympics, so he set his new goal on running the mile and breaking the 4-minute barrier. But remember, there were other runners that were also trying to break that 4-minute barrier. There was a big frenzy in runners that were trying to do it. Bannister did it in May. There was also other runners trying to do it. There was an Australian named Landy who was trying to do it at the same time. So he had to get it done as quickly as he could. So he worked on it very hard, and he did do it. But it, like I said, it only lasted for a little bit more than 40 days until it was broken again. And the reason why the myth of the 4-minute mile held so long was that people thought it was physically impossible to break that 4-minute barrier. They thought that that was as fast as people could go. So it was thought for a very long time that there was no runner who could actually run as fast as to break that 4-minute barrier. So it was a huge celebration to actually know that that there could be runners that could run faster than that 4-minute barrier. And then, yes, John Landy, the Australian, did break Bannister's record after that time. And now we have a record that has lasted since 1999. So running that fast for a mile is very, very difficult. And who will break it next? And which women runner will break the 4-minute mile? Because I know it will happen. There have been races in the past, too, mile races. One of the best races I remember watching, I never ran it myself, but it was called the California Mile. And it was a running race that started right at California and Market Streets in San Francisco. And it just went straight on California all the way up that steep hill in California, and then all the way down to California and Van Ness. It hasn't happened for many, many years, but it did happen for a long time, and then they stopped it. And it was a very fun race to watch because the runners went very fast, and you have to go very fast. It was just a mile race. But that hill is so steep, and they would have to take that hill really fast. They would just have to race really fast up the hill, and then take the other side, go down really fast and stop. And it was a tough race. If anyone remembers that race, I tried to find something about it online, and I couldn't find anything about that race. I Googled and Googled, and I could not find anything about it. But if anybody else remembers that, I would love to find out if somebody has any remembrances of that race. It was a very cool one to watch. Now, there is another race that is around, or it's been around a little while. It's called the Beer Mile. Yep, that is a race. It's a very popular race. And you like to drink beer? Do you like to run? Well, you might enjoy the Beer Mile, because you can do both at the same time. No, not actually both at the same time, but you can drink beer and run. Now, this is a race where it takes place on a track where it's a track where you run 4 laps, and it's equals one mile, right? And there are some rules, though. You drink a beer for each lap, okay? And here are the official rules for a beer mile. Okay. Each competitor drinks 4 cans or bottles of beer and runs 4 laps around a standard 400-meter running track. Start with chugging a beer, then run a lap, then a beer, then lap, then beer, then lap, then beer, then lap, and finish. Beer must be consumed before the lap begins within the transition area. The transition area is the 9-meter zone between the waterfall starting line for a mile race and the finish line of a 400-meter track. The race begins with competitors lined up on the mile starting line, drinking the first beer in the transition zone described in the step above. This ensures competitors cover a complete mile. Competitors can walk, move in the transition area while drinking, but all beer must be consumed in the transition area before setting off to run a lap. Women also drink 4 beers and run 4 laps. Some past rules list only required ladies to drink 3 beers. Competitors must drink canned or bottled beer that is no less than 12 ounces in volume, which is the standard canned bottle size in the U.S. and some other countries. No specialized cans or bottles may be used that give an advantage by allowing the beer to pour at a faster rate. Beer cans must not be tampered with in any manner. No shotgunning, puncturing the can, squeezing the can, etc. The same applies for bottles. No straws or aids allowed that speed up the pouring process. The only action allowed is opening the can with the tab at the top or twisting off the bottle cap of the bottle. Beer must be a minimum of 5% alcohol by volume. Hard ciders, hard sodas, and other alcoholic sugary drinks will not suffice. The beer must be a fermented alcoholic beverage brewed from malted cereal grains and flavored with hops. It's got to be beer. Each beer can or bottle must not be opened until the competitor enters the transition zone on each lap. Competitors who vomit before they finish the race must complete 1 penalty lap at the end of each race, immediately after the completion of their first lap. Vomiting more than once during the race still requires only 1 penalty lap. Well, that's a blessing. When attempting a performance for the official records, it is recommended to provide video evidence of the race and prove that all beer was sufficiently drank. This can be achieved by tipping the empty beer over your head after each chug to verify an empty vessel, or by collecting the containers and pouring the containers into a measuring cup to prove there is less than 4 ounces of liquid foam remaining total across all 4 beers. We recommend picking up a pack of disposable measuring cups for your next beer mile event. Now, Corey Bellamore of Canada, of course he's from Canada, holds the current beer mile record with a time of 4 minutes, 20.1 seconds. 4 minutes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's fast. And he's from Canada. So, yeah, that's serious. That's some serious beer drinking there. Eh? If you don't drink beer, they have other races offered. Chocolate milk races, eggnog, soda. Ooh, I don't want to do any of that. But this just shows you that the mile is still around. It might have been more popular in the past, but it's still around. And if you want to join a beer race, you can, or there might be some little mile races. Why not? Check them out. And maybe you'll find that someone will break the 4-minute mile or get even faster sooner than later. Who knows? All right. So that is today's show. And thank you so much. There will be some links on the website at martharunstheworld.com. Also on the website is links to if you want to become a Patreon patron. If you want to toss a couple extra bucks, that would be really cool. You can find that at martharunstheworld.com. If you want to email me, you can do so at martharunstheworld@gmail.com. And until next week, let's tie up our shoelaces and go for a run.